Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show on GB News. I'm delighted to be joined now by military historian and author Peter Caddick-Adams, who's written this book about Winston Churchill, and it's the first in a series of books about British prime ministers. You arguably started with the best, Peter. I mean, is that a fair assumption? Often voted as the greatest Briton that ever lived.
Yeah, I mean, it was a no-brainer, really, and quite clearly he is the greatest Briton who ever lived, and certainly the greatest British politician who ever lived.
What do you think he would make of recent events? I mean, the Labour landslide, the demise of the Conservatives.
Well, I mean, he really came into power, into government in a Liberal landslide in 1906. And, of course, he was booted out in a Labour landslide in 1945. So these are no strangers to him. I mean, he was a parliamentary creature. He'd be all over this. He wasn't of the television age. But you wouldn't be able to keep him out of your studio.
No. Oh, can you imagine if you could go back to those days?
He would be dominating it.
Can you imagine Winston Churchill on GB News? The mind boggles. But, I mean, look, his is a quite complicated legacy. It has been unpicked by some, particularly on the left, who have wanted to sort of accuse him of war crimes and all sorts of other misdemeanours and suggest that he isn't the hero that he was. I mean, what's the truth? When you were researching this book, what surprised you most about what you learnt about him? What do you think's most misunderstood about him?
Well, he's such a wide-ranging character. He has a life outside politics, and not just one, but many. I mean, he's a bricklayer, an aviator. He wins the Nobel Prize for Literature. He writes 15 million words, which is 30 books in his lifetime.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
You know,
just
never mind the
polymath.
Totally. Of the kind, I mean, my first memory was his funeral. Age 5, protesting in a long, cold queue, which gives the game away as to how old I am. But, I mean, he's a marker. He completely dominates certainly the first half of the 20th century at cabinet level. And, you know, for a very, very long period of time. And we can't say that about many other people. Well, we can't say that about anyone else since who's lasted that long. And
what motivated him most, do you think? I mean, obviously there was an ego there. But at the same time, I mean, it's just huge amounts of courage. You make a point in the book about the influence on him of his First World War experience.
Yeah. I think, well, to begin with, his first sort of influence is his father, because his father rose very young to be leader of the House and Chancellor, but died very early when Winston was very young. So part of the drive was he felt he would die young as well and had to achieve or out-achieve his father, outmatch his father. And that's a huge driver. And we see it with other people one of whose parents die young, Margaret Thatcher, for example.
Yes.
So I think that sort of sustains him. But the real person who's written out of his life, really, only gets one mention in one of his Second World War books, is Clementine, his wife.
Yes.
And she's the tower of strength. Yes. She's the one who says in the middle of the Blitz, Winston, you're not as nice as you used to be.
That's right.
Things like that. So she's always there. So I've tried to sort of redress the balance a bit and show that it's not just him, it's the wider family that sort of raise him up and prop him and sort of sustain him when, I mean, he has doubts and moments of depression, like we all do.
Black dog. Totally. What do you think was his finest hour? We were together, weren't we? And we did some of the commentary of the commemorations to mark the anniversary of D-Day recently. I mean, was it D-Day? Is it something else? Peter, what do you think?
Well, I argue that May, June 1940 is often labelled as his finest hour. I think it's the finest hour of the British people.
Yeah.
And his finest hour is probably D-Day, because he sets up a return to Normandy. He organises all the troops, inspires everybody. At a military level, he builds the coalition. And the 6th of June 1944, we couldn't have done on our own. And the coalition that returns to France is largely one that he has built, and it wouldn't have happened without him. So I actually think 1944 is his finest year.
And favourite quote? I mean, we may have been reminded of, in light of the recent result of a 34 share of the vote, then heralding this Labour landslide. That quote about the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. But which one is one of your favourite quotes?
Well, I mean, you have to go back to his 1940 speeches. And as my good friend Andrew Roberts observed, they are all punctuated or made with very short Anglo-Saxon Shakespearean words. We will fight. Nothing highfalutin, very, very simple English strung together and repeated.
Yes.
And that's what makes all the difference, I think. And we can all call one of those to mind, of whatever age. And I think they still send shivers down my spine.
They do too. If you listen to the speeches again, they're absolutely awesome. And so is this book, Peter. Here you are. Here it is again, Winston Churchill. The first. Who are you doing next?
The next one is Harold Wilson.
Harold Wilson.
The series.
All right, great. So it's the first of a series. Thank you very much indeed for coming in and talking to me about that.